love his story.
All right, I think we are ready.
Are we? All right. And
We're getting learned.
3, 2.
Welcome back to Shot of History. I'm Stephanie.
I am the color man, Big Dev. T.
I'm Melissa.
I'm Jeannie.
I'm Calvin.
Josh.
And Ashley.
We're all here again. A week later.
Whoop, whoop.
We are doing this a quote-unquote week later.
Yes. And today, Calvin is going to be our historian, and we're going to be talking about it's Aaron Burr.
Aaron Burr!
So we're going to be discussing Aaron Burr, but before we do that, y'all know what you got to do.
We got to do a shot.
Shot time.
Shot. That is some good orange
Oh, yeah,
crush.
that's good.
Ooh.
Wow, that's really good.
Delicious orange crush.
So how was the peach moonshine?
That was actually really good.
It's not
Yeah.
super sweet. It's really nice and mellow.
It's not,
I cannot wait for rhubarb season so I can make my rhubarb mead.
I can't wait for rhubarb season.
That
Yeah.
is
I want some
indeed
of that.
the whitest thing you have ever said.
I can't
Just
wait.
going to go out on a limb
I
there.
can't wait to make rhubarb pie, so I'm with you.
Man, I cannot wait till rhubarb season, man. Oh, shit! Shit's going to pop off!
There may be a midnight excursion to my old house to Freedom half of the rhubarb plant so that I can have it.
I
Yeah,
have
just gonna do
already
some night
told
ops.
you that I have a corner in my yard that you are more than welcome to
I still
transplant
need.
said
I'm
rhubarb.
gonna have to clear that with Tony before I just steal a plant.
I think you all just like saying rhubarb.
It's
Rhubarb is delicious.
I feel like rhubarb is one of those
I do
fruits
have
that got a name because they ran out of names. They're like,
Yeah.
fuck. We got
I don't know
apples,
if I've
we
had
got
rhubarb pie
pears.
before.
Shit.
I don't know.
It
What
tastes
the
just
rhubarb?
like
Rhubarb. That's what we'll
It
call
might have
it.
been strawberry rhubarb. potentially.
Yeah,
I don't know.
strawberry rhubarb is what most people have, but
Yeah.
if you just have rhubarb,
Sounds like a Snapple flavor.
yeah.
Yeah.
It is a pie that is the tartest thing that you've
Yes.
ever had in your mouth. It's like lemon
Is it though?
on crack. Like, it is the best.
Tart, not musky. Tart.
Hey, I keep my shit high and tight.
Here we go.
I'm gonna go back to drinking.
Yeah, and on that note, Cal, let's
Talking about
get
freaking
started.
rhubarb and we get
All
off on
right,
this.
so as she said, we're going to be talking about Aaron Burr today. And
Both of his parents died.
So Burr is the word?
Well, yeah, we will get to him. It's
Wait
funny.
out, Calvin.
You know, before I started, learning history, there was that famous milk commercial where the guy was eating like lots of peanut butter.
Yeah.
It's like, for $1 million, who shot Alexander Hamilton? You're like, oh, like, I can't understand you. And he had like Aaron Burr pictures all over his
He
wall.
had the bullet under glass.
Yeah, you had the bullet, the
I
gun.
love that. But of
Oh,
course,
I remember that commercial,
Burr
yeah.
has come back into popular parlance because of the popularity of the stage play Hamilton. Yep. So
It started singing "Dear Theodosia."
yeah. So which interestingly enough, I have not seen Hamilton yet, and it is
haven't
playing.
either.
It is playing in Detroit right
The
now.
tickets
I heard
are
tickets
too
are
expensive.
They're crazy.
They are.
Yeah.
But there was a lottery where you get
I've-
2 tickets for $10 bucks each.
I've played
so
that lottery every day that
I've
I could
lost
possibly
every
go.
single time.
Yeah,
Every
it's
single
not
time.
happen. I gotta do it today.
I would cancel some serious shit if I got it. 'Cause, like, if you get the tickets, the next day you have to go.
It's
So I mean, I could have like a friend's wedding and it'd be like, oh man, sorry, I
I
can't
got
make it.
Hamilton tickets.
Right.
You're my best man.
I had a buddy that bought season
heart
tickets
surgery.
Just for that.
just to be able to
Just
get
to be able to go see Hamilton.
My-
Oh, yeah, because
my-
ticket holders get tickets.
My
Yeah, I got 'em
daughter,
first, yeah.
for her birthday, got tickets to go see Hamilton. It was what my parents bought her,
Oh.
but not in Detroit.
Oh.
In Texas. So she's flying to Texas
Hey.
Well, I
at the
mean,
end of the month
that's
to
kinda
see
cool.
Hamilton.
Well, there you
I'm
go.
not invited.
You know what?
Well,
what would suck is what would suck is if you didn't like the play.
Oh, she loves it.
Yeah,
I
that's
know
really far
people
to go.
do, but I'm
Yeah.
just saying. Well, some people like the original cast, and the
Yeah.
one that's traveling is not the original cast. They're amazing.
Yeah,
Right.
sure.
But what if you didn't like the play? Like, oh shit, I traveled all the way to Texas on this hype train.
She's not paying for it. I think she'll be fine.
Yeah.
Anyway,
not for money.
so we know how I start off episodes. I like to start off by setting the stage around what was going on at a particular time in the world, and so we're looking at the year 1800. So some
year
things
was
that
1800.
the year was 1800. Some
Picture
things
it.
that happened
US
in
in
1800.
1800.
John Chapman begins handing out apple seeds and seedlings to Ohio settlers, better known as Johnny Appleseed.
Yeah, he did it for shitty
As
reasons.
1800. Yeah, well, you know.
I guess we should have done the
Just,
apple
just
moonshine.
leaving that out. The first smallpox vaccination. First smallpox vaccination is invented in North America.
Is that X-Pax's
Yes, it is.
midget
Yes.
counterpart
Yeah.
in WWE?
It is. Here's smallpox. All right. So smallpox. So John Brown who would lead the raid on Harper's Ferry and whose execution would help ignite the American Civil War, is born in the year 1800. Washington, D.C. is established as the capital of the United States of America.
Because there wasn't in the room when it happened.
Yeah, that's a nice Hamilton reference. In the room where it happens. John Adams becomes the first U.S. president to live in the executive mansion, which would later be renamed the White House. The United States, the U.S. Library of Congress is founded on April 24th, 1800 with a $5,000 allocation. And America...
So 6 books.
Yep. And America is about to participate in its first truly contested election, which would come to be known as the Revolution of 1800, which is what we are going to be talking about today. But let me rewind real quick. The U.S. Library of Congress, fun story about this. This is where I did the research for this episode. This is why I wasn't able to be here when we did the anniversary episodes. I was in D.C. at the Library of Congress. So, the Library of Congress is on Capitol Hill. It is directly across from the U.S. Capitol building. Something I didn't know
That you weren't allowed to.
That Capitol Hill is actually a hill?
Capitol Hill is literally on a hill. So
You didn't know that?
No, they have a bike share program. Well, okay, so look,
I'm going to stare at you with
that's
like
fine.
amazement.
Here's
really?
why, as a historian, I mean, as a
I
historian,
guess
I
you
should
only
know.
realize that until you go
but-
to DC and actually see it.
But if you have a row of churches
Yeah.
in small towns, anytime there was a settlement, they would call that Piety Hill. It didn't have to be on a hill.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why I was thinking, oh, Capitol Hill, it's just a name. But they had a bike share program, and I was like, I'm going to bike from the Museum of African American History up to
Capitol Hill.
to the Library of Congress, which is on Capitol Hill, and I
day and a
am
half later.
I am hoofing it. I am hoofing it up this hill. I got off the bike, walked it. I was like, I'm good. I can get back on. Hop back on. I was like, nope.
And then he threw up a little bit.
I'm going to get back on and use my
No.
feet to
No,
walk.
if Everclear doesn't make me throw up, biking is not going to make me throw up. But either
Where
way,
is the Smithsonian Museum of African American History? Where is that at in comparison?
It is okay. So
Is it with
it
all
is
the
pretty
other-
much right. If you walk out of the doors of the African American Museum, you are at the Washington Monument.
Okay. Oh, so it's on the other end.
Monument,
It's on the other end of the
Yes.
the
Yeah,
mall.
they're
I
in the
like
mall,
how he's
yes.
just got his hand going up. And
Because we all know it's
we all know
giant
that's the
penis.
Giant penis,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The
Focal
obelisk
point.
in the water.
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So
I
anyway.
did not go to Library of Congress when I went to DC.
It is
I want to.
absolutely amazing, and here's how it works. Because it's the largest library in the world, you can't just go there and take a book off the shelf. They have people working in all these sections with books, so you go to this area to study, and you go into their computer system and you say, I want this book, and 30 minutes later, somebody arrives with a cart with that book and just drops it off at your desk. And
Nice.
It's really
Like
quite
you're in
cool.
Wow.
They don't want you touching the books.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can
You will put them
You
in the
don't touch
wrong
the book,
order.
like you don't.
Sure.
You don't touch the books until it gets to you.
Correct.
Like,
Right.
and
Yeah.
you
And
give it
then
back
if
to
you
them?
say, hey, I'm going to come back tomorrow to continue, they say, hey, what's your last name? Your last name's Moore. Okay. Take it around the corner. And you can put the books in this bay over here, and they'll stay there for 2 weeks. So you can keep. You don't have to keep having the books brought to you. You can just go and grab the books.
Right.
So they got a really nice organizational system there at the
Interesting.
Library of Congress.
Where every librarian wants to work.
Yeah, it's
That's
really
like the
cool.
library mecca.
But so many more stories I could tell you about there. But that's where the research for this episode came from, mostly, which is pretty cool. So, kind of give you some background. I got to back up 4 years though. So John Adams won the election of 1796 against his opponent Thomas Jefferson, right? And
Stupid Frankenfile.
yeah. So Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton's trying to get a guy by the name of Charles Cotesworth Pinckney elected. Someone he thought that he could control if he became president. Like he could,
So,
Pink-
so like Putin.
yeah, I suppose.
He's like, I'm not going to get
or
elected.
Cheney, right? So
Because I had an affair,
so
but this guy,
Pinckney would be
take
president.
care of.
Pinckney would be president, but Hamilton would kind of be the guy behind the scenes controlling him. That's what he was hoping for. But the New England Federalists figured things out. They figured that this kind of thing was going on, and so they all voted for Jefferson, right? So Hamilton's trying to be sneaky, and because of this, though, because of all these machinations, it didn't work out at all, and John Adams ekes out this small win against Thomas Jefferson. And so prior to the ratification of the 12th Amendment, votes for president and vice president weren't listed on separate ballots. So although John Adams ran as Jefferson's main opponent in the general election, Jefferson came in second, so he
was
became
vice
vice president.
president,
He became
yeah.
vice president of the United
But,
States.
like, we probably shouldn't have enemies actually rule together.
Yeah, and so it was
I don't know.
kind
I
of-
think that system might actually be better right about now.
Yeah, that might be a nice checks and balances. Yeah.
True.
somebody assumed that it would be okay because it took till the 12th Amendment to change that
Yeah.
shit. But here's the deal. So Adams becomes president in 1796, but for the 4 years that he was president, he was mired in controversy. There was animosity between the two major parties, which were the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans at the time. The unpopular Jay Treaty was just kind of following him around as well, and the passage of the repressive Alien and Sedition Act. So if you don't know what the Jay Treaty was, it facilitated 10 years of peaceful trade between the United States and Britain. But it pissed off the French,
Yeah.
who were in the midst of their own revolution, right?
We
Right.
fucking helped you win your revolution,
Yeah.
and now you're trading with Britain?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it bitterly divided Americans. So this is why I love being a historian, because people will tell me, oh, America's the most divided it's ever been. I'm like, the most divided?
Do you know your history at all?
We had a civil war. We were pretty divided at that point. Like when,
Nope. More divided now.
when
divided
our
now.
current president, who shall not be named, says, no president has ever been treated worse than I have. I'm like, Kennedy was shot in the head. He's shot in the face, man. That's not cool at all. But either way,
Kennedy was shot.
so
Lincoln. I mean,
Jay Treaty. So we've got peaceful trade, 10 years peaceful trade, but it's pissing off the French, bitterly divided Americans. So much so that parties that didn't exist in certain states popped up in every single one of the states. So you had pro-treaty Federalists and you had anti-treaty Democratic Republicans in every single state now. Instead of just having a red and blue state, you had states that were pretty much divided right down
Ooh,
the
a
middle
purple
politically.
state.
Yeah. Also, the Alien and Sedition Acts, that really just kind of ended Adams' presidency. He was not going to win again. So if you don't know what those were, it was 4 different acts. The Naturalization Act, so that extended, you at first had to have 5 years to live in the United States before you could become a citizen. It extended it to 14 years. The Alien Act allowed the president to deport any resident alien considered, quote unquote, dangerous to peace and safety.
So the Irish.
Yeah. The Alien Enemies Act authorized the deportation of residents if their home country was at war with America. So you might not be a danger, but
your country
we're at
is.
war with you, so you're
Right,
out too.
right.
Now Adams never actually deported anybody. He never signed the deportation of any citizens, but that was
He had
on
the
the books as well.
option.
But then the worst part of it was the Sedition Acts. Which was allowed the government to punish those found guilty of, quote unquote, printing, writing, or speaking in a scandalous or malicious way against the government of the United States, unquote.
So, against the freedom of speech.
Yeah, the First
Yeah.
Amendment, First Amendment's pretty much out the window. It's actually considered one of the most grievous assaults on constitutional rights in American history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you imagine
Yeah.
if like
Should
Twitter
be.
was a thing then?
Yeah, so
Like
we're
we'd all be done.
we're talking between
I'd be
1796
gone
and
from the US.
1800s.
Yeah.
So when the election of 1800 comes around, John Adams, who's a Federalist, and his running mate Charles Cotesworth Pinckney found themselves on the losing side of that election.
Just a tad.
Thomas Jefferson, who was a Democratic Republican, and Aaron Burr easily won the election. Right. The only problem was Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr tied in the Electoral College. Both of them got 73 votes. Right. And since the 12th Amendment wasn't a thing yet, that meant Jefferson and Burr tied for the presidency. Right. But here's the deal.
I'll Rochambeau you for it.
Yeah. The rock, paper, scissors, right? But no. So,
Pinky in the nuts.
but here's the deal. Everybody knew that
arm wrestle.
it was expected that Jefferson would become president. Nobody foresaw Burr tying with Jefferson. Everybody assumed Jefferson's going to be president. That's who we want to be president.
Nobody saw that
and Burr can be the vice president. But Burr argued, well, the people have spoken. People have spoken
it's
in my
time.
favor.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't step aside to let Jefferson become president. So under the Constitution, the tie meant that it's going to go to the House of Representatives. Still, and here's the problem: the House of Representatives is still under Federalist control at that point, right? And so that they were going to decide the question. But okay, so in order to understand this, though. You need to understand Aaron Burr. So let's give you a little history on Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr Jr., by the way.
Yeah.
Aaron Burr Jr.
His dad died.
Yes, everybody's dad dies.
Parents
Eventually.
died.
Dad.
die.
So
They died.
he was born in 1756 in New Jersey. He's a Jersey boy.
Everything's legal in Jersey.
He was the second child of the Reverend Aaron Burr Sr., who was a Presbyterian minister.
Was he born in a velour tracksuit?
And he was.
Yeah.
Spiked hair.
I was like, he didn't have a lure at that time.
So his dad was the second president of the College of New Jersey, better known today as Princeton, Princeton University. His mother was Esther Edwards Burr, and she was the daughter of noted Congregationalist theologian Jonathan Edwards, who I am an expert on, interestingly enough. His most famous work is titled Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. So you know Aaron Burr was a little fucked up in the head. But both of his parents died when he was 2, by the time he was 2. So he lived with his maternal grandparents briefly, but they died a year later.
Oh my God.
Well, you got to remember the time. Everybody
Everything I
died.
touch
Yeah,
dies.
yeah. So
Typhoid,
so
dysentery.
Don't die now.
he ended up living with an uncle, and his uncle was abusive. His uncle beat him. So he ran away. So this is kind of interesting. So as I was reading and researching this, I'm going, families aren't all that different now. We like to think that we've evolved. I'm like, he had a shitty uncle, an abusive uncle,
right.
abusive parent, that kind of thing.
Well, his parents died before he was 2. We don't know if they were
right.
abusive.
Right.
But either way, he ended up with an uncle who beat him. And he ran away from home, a few times because of this. But he was
As you do.
he was admitted to Princeton at the ripe age of 13.
Well, college back then was really
That's
high
because
school.
family.
I don't know about that. He finished at 16.
Yeah.
But he decided to continue on studying theology.
Okay.
I'm going to follow my dad's footsteps.
Yep. Moved on though to study law when he's like, God ain't real. No, he didn't. He didn't do that.
I
don't know-
can't make money with
I don't
this.
know. I don't know
like, what's
why.
this bullshit?
Right. He moved on to study law,
the
but he put his studies on
megachurches.
hold. The Revolutionary War was kind of kicking off, so he joined the Continental Army.
It's a great song with George Washington.
This will help you understand this a little bit more. He started hanging out with a guy by the name of Benedict Arnold during the Revolutionary War.
Oh man.
And that's where he learned to
and-
shoot people in the back.
Eventually through some
He didn't shoot him
nepotism,
in the back. He shot him in the front.
through some nepotism, Burr became part of General George Washington's staff, but he left the staff after 2 weeks to return to the battlefield because that's where the action was and the glory was.
That's where you get to make a name for yourself.
I suppose, yep.
That's
But
where you
I
become
think it's
president.
George Washington.
here's
That.
the other thing. He's like, this is where all the action is. But Aaron Burr was not an exceptional soldier.
Yeah, he was a bad shot.
He was terrible. No, later he wasn't. But
He only needed to make his mark once.
you're getting
It had to be
ahead.
one-on-one.
You're getting ahead of me here.
It couldn't be one on a mass. It had to be one-on-one.
Yeah.
But he got his ass handed to him in 1778 at the Battle of Monmouth. And due to failing health, he eventually resigned from the Continental Army and went back to studying law. He got married, had a few illegitimate children, blah blah blah. Par for the course, right?
As you do.
Yeah. I mean, he and his future boss would have a lot in common that way. Fuck future Jefferson. So he then becomes involved in politics in New York, working to get Thomas Jefferson elected to the presidency, right? So he's kind of canvassing. So in 1799, Burr founds the Bank of the Manhattan Company, which gave rise to the rivalry between him and Alexander Hamilton, right? Whom he would later murder.
Alexander Hamilton.
So So here's the deal. Federalists
You knew it was coming.
pretty much ran the banks in New York,
Yep.
and Hamilton owned the Bank of New York.
Because he's smart.
But here's what Burr did. Burr approached both the Federalists and Hamilton asking for funds to start a water company. And so at the 11th hour, he changed the application. He used the funds to open a rival bank. No water company was ever created.
Wow.
And so in addition to creating...
Proving how smart he is.
Yeah.
So in addition to creating competition, though, Burr used the bank to fund and promote Democratic Republican politics and power. So he basically used Federalist money to bankroll the competition.
So this is essentially the founding of the first PAC.
Yeah, exactly.
And he also kicks out Hamilton's father-in-law for his position in the government.
Yeah.
He wins that election.
So this brings us to the election. Landing this plane here in a few minutes. All right, so this brings us to the election. Jefferson and Burr tied, each with 73 votes. Burr remained quiet publicly, but he refused to step aside and cede the victory to Jefferson, right? So we're back to where we started.
And you said he had campaigned for Jefferson.
He
as
had
well.
campaigned for Jefferson, but now they're tied. It's like,
Right.
oh, this is fortuitous.
Like campaign for Jefferson against Adams, not against himself.
That's why I'm like, now I'm confused.
Yeah.
So
There's some hanging chads we got to recount.
Yeah.
So there's this rumor going. There's this rumor going around though that okay, Burr's being quiet about this, but he's also kind of quietly behind the scenes trying to get people to vote for him. Yeah, so he's talking to the Federalists. He's also talking to the Republicans, trying to all get them to vote for him. But no solid evidence ever came to light on this, at least not at the time. And so
No one was in the room
historians
when it happened.
historians have tended to give Burr the benefit of the doubt, saying, "Hey, this is just rumor milling." But in 2011, a letter was found that proved beyond a doubt that Burr was trying to orchestrate stealing the election from Jefferson. Right? They found these letters like, "Hey, how are we going to steal this election from Jefferson?"
Busted.
Signed, Aaron Burr. The election was decided in the House of Representatives with 10 state delegations voting for Jefferson, 4 voting for Burr, and 2 making no choice.
The 2 independents.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Thanks to Alexander Hamilton, Burr lost, and Jefferson became president, and Burr became vice president. And because of what Burr did, Jefferson never trusted Aaron Burr as vice president.
Yeah.
As you should.
Never trusted
That
him.
was smart.
He didn't trust him, even though he operated as a stellar president of the Senate, right? Because the vice president's the president of the Senate, especially in the Marbury versus Madison decision, which we should do an episode on at some point. So because of this, Burr hated Hamilton. So Jefferson runs again in 1804. Jefferson runs again in 1804. Burr is not on the ticket, so Burr runs for governor of New York. And he ends up losing to a virtual nobody due to a smear campaign against him by Alexander Hamilton. Right? So these guys are like, fuck, I hate you, I fucking hate you.
Yeah.
And like we
You are
should
done
really
in this country.
We should do an episode on smear campaigns.
Yeah.
Oh,
They really-
absolutely.
Like they're amazing.
Political rhetoric has not been more peppered with vitriol since now.
Yeah.
You're a hermaphrodite.
So Burr challenges him to a duel.
PC.
Now here's the deal. Duels were called affairs of honor. They were called
yeah.
affairs of honor. So he
I'm
felt
gonna
like
shoot you
he
to
felt like
preserve my honor.
his honor had
Right.
been
That's my favorite part.
besmirched
Yeah.
by the smear campaign. Now he's in New York running for governor, right? And affairs of honor duels are illegal in New York. They're not as illegal in New Jersey. So
Everything's legal in New Jersey.
they decide to meet at Weehawken.
people go there, but you gotta pay
at
to get out.
Weehawken, New Jersey, at the same spot where Alexander Hamilton's oldest son had died in a duel 3 years prior.
We got the bell.
Take that shot of crush.
Now, historically, there is disagreement on who fired first. But
It's a great song about it in Hamilton.
yeah, who shot first? Han shot first. All right, no. But Burr,
Who's on first?
Hamilton missed.
different.
Hamilton missed.
High
Now
five.
here's how affairs of honor worked. You would showing up meant that you were willing to fight for your honor. Normally in duels, you would shoot off into the sky, right? You wouldn't actually aim at somebody else. So it is said
So then what was
that
it doing?
Hamilton.
Matter, they
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
they
That-
weren't
well,
rifles,
it was
so
just
it
the
went
fact
off to
that-
the side
I mean,
anyway.
The fact that you showed up, it's like showing up at the flagpoles after school, like for a fight. The fact that you
Right,
showed
right.
up meant that you were a man, right?
Yeah.
You didn't.
Okay.
It's like
You didn't run away
a
from a
bar
fight.
fight between 2 bros. Fuck you, man. Fuck you. I love you, bro.
I love you, bro, right? So basically,
You besmirched my honor, and I am here. Now fire in the sky.
but not between these two, right? So
Yeah, I feel like that
they
wouldn't
were
happen.
bros.
Hamilton fires. Hamilton
No,
fires
there's no
off into the
love with
sky.
these bros.
And Burr is like, not today, not today, Satan, and shoots him. It hits him in the hip, pierces his liver and his spine, it kills him.
Wait, hold on.
Fantastic.
He shot him in the hip.
Right.
And it pierced his liver.
Well, 'cause
It
you
was
stand
probably like the
this.
trajectory.
It was a magic bullet.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
I
so
mean,
awesome though,
you
because
stand
The government has known that
there.
magic had existed for
So it goes
some time now.
Maybe he was turned sideways.
Yeah, that's what I'm
bullets
thinking.
would have
Bullets
Yeah,
were-
but still,
So
in
it's-
the
blunt objects.
hip.
Bullets
It's
were very
also-
inaccurate.
yeah,
They
yeah.
ding around your body.
And this
so
is not going at the velocity they do now. It could have easily bounced off his hip into his liver.
I don't know.
And they were very.
Like off
they're
the
more
bone.
like
Yeah.
22s.
They were very blunted.
I'm still
objects as well. They
skeptical
weren't pointed.
that the bullet bounced around that.
Dave is not here.
with.
Skeptical
It'll just
Dave
bounce
is
around
not
in your
here.
body.
Skeptical Dev is skeptical. Yeah. All right. So after this, he flees to South Carolina. His daughter lived in South Carolina, so he's hanging out with her. He's like, hey,
Oh, is that
if anybody
the-
asks for me, Dad's not here. All right. So, but Dad, you're the vice president of the United States.
Nope.
Dad's
Not today. That ain't me, son.
Wasn't me.
So he fled to South
No,
Carolina.
my name is A.A. Ron.
Yeah, you don't fucked up now, A.A. Robert. All right. So I was hoping somebody would make that joke. All right. So I now feel permission to do that.
Yeah, there
So he flees to South Carolina, stays with his daughter for a bit. Then he goes back to D.C. to finish out his term as vice president, like nothing had happened.
I don't know how
know
that.
President.
But he did avoid New
I don't know where
Jersey,
he went to. I didn't do anything.
New
Jersey?
Jersey and New York for a while. God damn it!
Crush it, Calvin. Crush it.
Yep.
New Jerseys.
All right, so that's Aaron Burr there. One last thing about it. One last thing after this.
But wait, there's more.
After the vice presidency for him, he decided to commit treason.
Well, he was.
Benedict Arnold. Yeah.
Same thing.
yeah.
Well, he was president.
pretty par for the course here. So he planned to form an army and start a war with Spain by seizing parts of their holdings in either Florida, Mexico, or both. Right?
That seems very ambitious.
Evidence
Hang on, folks. Wait till 2020.
he only got into the planning phases of this, but evidence was brought to Thomas Jefferson,
Who's like, I really hate this guy, so thank you for this.
and Jefferson announced the conspiracy to Congress. Hey, Aaron's fucking up.
Was it a series of
Ron.
emails?
A.A. Ron is fucking up.
I fucked up today.
Jefferson publicly proclaims that Burr is guilty of treason, which is a hanging offense. A reward is offered, and Burr was eventually captured in rural Alabama and placed on trial in Virginia, with Chief Justice John Marshall presiding. Now, Jefferson was subpoenaed to testify, and he refused, which bolstered the precedence of executive privilege, right, to this day.
Yeah.
Burr is acquitted not once but twice.
What?
Because he's white, right? That's how the justice system works.
And he has money.
Yeah.
And tends to shoot people.
So he's acquitted twice. He jumps bail. He flees to Europe.
Is it jumping bail if you're acquitted?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, because there were still charges against him.
Yeah, there are charges against him, right? Putting him on trial again.
If
He
the
jumped
gun,
bail,
if
right?
the gun
Like,
don't fit,
this
you
was
must
before,
acquit.
like, Double Jeopardy.
So he goes to Europe. He tries getting support for his let's fuck Spain plan again.
Is there a
least he was
particular?
closer
Wait,
that
he's just
time.
not like Spain, or is there a
He-
particular?
I don't know why he wants to do
He was
this.
just like, I don't want to go after Spain.
Gotta
Fuck
fight
guys.
somebody.
So he launched a Fuck Spain campaign from Europe.
Yeah.
Yes.
That sounds way smarter than doing it from the United States.
Never comes to
Wow.
fruition. But then he returns to New York in 1812 in disguise.
Nobody will know who
Hey,
I am.
aren't you Aaron Burr? Huh? What? Put his mustache back on.
This
If it
is
worked,
working.
if it worked for fucking Lord for me.
Yeah. You're just wearing glasses, Aaron Burr.
No.
Maybe he came in a dress.
My name is Burr Aaron.
Just like, shut the fuck up.
Let me tell you what
and-
happens to people.
But so he returns in 1812 in disguise. He eventually returns to law. Everything kind of blows over. He returns to practicing law until his death in 1836.
Better
And then he
practice law
died.
than-
And then he's
Right.
dead. So that's the story of Aaron
Aw,
Burr.
then he died.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Just like his parents.
Yep.
But I wanted to
I feel like
And
it
his
should've been- I
grandparents.
feel like it should have been a lot sooner though, because he was a dick.
I wanted to do this episode on Aaron Burr because I'm announcing the beginning of a new podcast where I will be looking at the presidential losers, those who have run and never become president. And so Aaron Burr was
And
the
tried to start
Aaron Burr.
And try to start wars with Spain.
Aaron Fur sounds like his pimp name.
I am only drinking Crush.
I know. Yeah.
That's the weird part about this.
This
Aaron-
problem is
Aaron
that
Burr
Calvin
went
is
to,
sober.
went to
I'm
Europe.
sober right now.
Yeah.
Maybe you
Somebody
need
said,
to-
hey,
got
sober
himself
cows
a-
is way more
got
fun.
himself
That's
a
not true.
brothel.
But
More
either
fun
way,
for us.
I feel like the next
so-
show we should just keep on hitting.
starting a new podcast where I will be looking at the candidates who ran for president but never became president, and Aaron Burr was the first.
That's like right up my alley. That excites me.
Yeah. So anyway,
It sounds like an awesome show.
that's Aaron
Yeah.
Burr. Yeah, I haven't decided on the name yet. I'm thinking of either the Losers or 1599 Pennsylvania Avenue, which is
I like that.
right next to life outside the
I
window.
think
it's a
that's
lot of
I think
words,
that's
but I
too
really
obscure.
like it.
Yeah, that's
if
the
you don't
thing.
get
It's
the
like-
reference,
But then again,
that's not
if
gonna
you
be
call it
good.
if you call it the
Listening.
losers, people are gonna be like, "Is this just a podcast about that really awful
Movie.
comedy?"
Yeah.
Wasn't the guy who played Captain America in that movie?
I think $15.99 will capture the people that it's meant to
Yeah.
because I feel
Yeah.
like
That's
that's
true.
a very
Yeah.
specific audience.
Okay.
Or you just call it $15.99
Right.
colon the losers.
I like
I mean,
it.
that's
Presidential losers.
Yeah, that's not horrible.
Well, cool.
I can't
I like
wait.
the feedback.
Yeah, I love it.
All right.
All right. Well, I guess it's time to
And that be Burr.
pop out the plugs. I'll go first.
All right.
Just get it done with. StephanieMenard.com for most of your Stephanie Menard needs. My convention schedule is on there and everything that I am working on. So check it out.
Done and done.
Calvin Moore. You can check me out, leadingquestionsnow.com. So Leading Questions with Calvin Moore is my podcast. My business is 7.2 Tours. Give tours to Detroit. Check that out, 72tours.com. And then coming soon, probably in the next month or so, I'm just going to go with it. $15.99. $15.99 is the name of the show. I'll figure out what the
Tag.
tagline is and all that jazz. But $15.99.
All
It
right.
doesn't have Calvin Moore
Genie's
in it.
promoting Hamilton, apparently.
Yeah.
Alexander Hamilton.
Go see Hamilton.
My name is Alexander Hamilton.
Copyrights. Copyrights.
I don't own the rights to this music.
I guess the plus side
Under
is,
the 5 seconds, I promise.
I guess the plus side is it brought to light, a lot history, so which is
Yeah.
good because there are a lot of people that don't know
Well,
our
and that's
history at all.
And now there's a bunch of people in New Jersey and New York who like hip hop who would have never loved hip hop before.
No,
So-
that's
Technically,
There were
we could
people in
play
New
the
Jersey
full
that didn't
song
like hip
hop.
from the play, as long as we talked about it later, because that would then be fair use.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
As long as we review
We are
it,
an edutainment.
yes.
Uh,
And as for me, if you're watching the video at Podman Big God. At Podman Big Dev on Twitter and on Instagram and at SourcePoint Press on Twitter and Instagram and Deepwater Games. I basically pack everything up and ship it out. So if it's
Sweet.
fucked up, fuck
It's
you.
your
I don't
fault.
care. And as always, fuck Steve.
There you go.
And fuck Jefferson.
All right, you guys. Until next time, I'm Stephanie.
I am the Color Man Big Dev.
I'm Melissa.
Genie.
Calvin.
Josh.
And Ashley.